Hey there, I'm glad you could make it. I'm Mendacii, and
Welcome to Dragon's Dogma 2.
I want to start off by saying that I love Dragon's Dogma, warts and all. I was playing the first game for the third time while waiting for the second to release and got about 30 hours in. Not terribly far, all things considered, but it served to sate my hunger while waiting for the sequel. However, I didn't realize how much that would aid me in setting the tone and readying my mind for how the second game plays and handles mechanically after 70 hours of gameplay. I won't be touching any specific story elements or spoiling any important story NPC story arcs. Keep in mind, I'll be saying and showing some pretty negative things throughout, but I do recommend this game, and I have loved my time with it so far. We're here to be honest. Let me know what you think, or if you feel like I missed the mark on absolutely anything down below. Dragon's Dogma 2 starts out exceptionally strong. The intro is explosive to say the least, and it took me a while to pick my jaw up off the floor. I noticed as well while watching the opening credits that Daigo Ikino, the character designer for Devil May Cry 5, was the art director here, and Bingo Moriyashi, the story writer for the original Dragon's Dogma and Devil May Cry 3, 4, and 5 was back. If you're watching this, I'm sure that you've seen how great the character creator is. Getting into the pawns, well, pawns are mostly the same as they were in the first game, though they talk less, say less annoying things, don't repeat themselves as much, unless there's a ladder nearby. They do feel a little bit smarter in Dragon's Dogma 2, aside from not being able to use healing or curative items as needed unless trained in that method. There are, however, a ton of different kinds of pawns to fill up your party's other 2 slots. There's also not a wrong way to play, just more challenging ones. Having nothing but archers means you won't have to worry too much about anything that's flying, but you'll be sorely missing the healing magic of a mage or the powerhouse swings of a warrior. Personally, I like to hire some kind of tank and a mage every time I play to let my pawn focus on extra damage dealing. Gabi, as I named her, is such a fun little companion, and others seem to really enjoy her as well. I'm happy to see the favorite and ranking system has returned, as well as like the addition of pawn quests is really interesting. You can earn quite a bit of money or extra loot through the pawn system. Just well, don't be a turd and send your pawn out in junk equipment with the hopes of someone giving you a bunch of brand new equipment by way of just outfitting your pawn for you. I do have a gripe with this system though. It still relies on you sleeping in either an inn or a house that you purchased for your pawn party to quote-unquote update their stats and gear. It feels very off considering how much focus has been putting on being away from civilization in DD2. Speaking of getting away from civilization, the new camping mechanic with the reusable camping kits is actually really neat. I enjoy the goofy chill out sesh that you can have with your pawns and the even stranger live action meat cooking cinematic we get when you choose to cook up some dinner for everyone. You'll likely be camping quite a bit since it's the free option and you incur wounds that will not heal from item usage in the sequel. The world outside the walls of towns and cities can be harsh, especially at a lower level, but it follows the same difficulty curve of the first one in all ways but one: enemy density. It's not uncommon to be set upon by harpies and goblins and saurians while fighting off a pack of wolves. It can be overwhelming for a new player or someone unfamiliar with Dragon's Dogma or these higher difficulty RPGs that lack a difficulty setting. Luckily, you won't be running into dragons very often in the early levels, though monsters like ogres and cyclops are quite frequent, especially if you like to stray from the road. If you're having a hard time, however, there's a lot more you can do than just get good. If you've got friends that are playing, you can always hire their pawns for free, even if they're in an exceptionally higher level than you. Sadly, you need to get your hands on a riftstone, more specifically a grand riftstone located in the capital cities or story important towns in order to hire specific pawns. The riftstones that you'll encounter in the wild will allow you to hire pawns that are of a specific aesthetic, inclination, or even body build. I do have a gripe to share in this early bit. I, for the life of me, can't find the article, but the fact remains the same. A couple of days after Dragon's Dogma 2 released, someone had written an article saying that they were tired of facing the same enemies over and over. The journalist went on about only running into goblins, wolves, harpies, saurians, bandits, nothing else really. My knee-jerk reaction was, yeah, that's how DD1 was, but there's a myriad of other enemies out at night, and there's way more map. There's no way there aren't other types. I was wrong. I'll say it. I was wrong. I've been to Batal, the Elven Lands, the Misty Marshes, the edges of the coast. There are only variants of all the primary enemies in every area. Of course, there's a healthy sprinkling of various elite enemy types, such as the Minotaur, Ogre, Cyclops, Griffin, Chimeras, Wights, Dragons, and more, along with their own variations. There are also set-piece monsters and even unique fights, but they are few and very far between. You've also seen in my video by now that sometimes monsters behave strangely, clip through environments, fly up walls, and generally speaking, act erratically. Sadly, that stretches beyond the enemies and is indicative of some of the deeper issues at play in Dragon's Dogma 2. Sometimes you climb up monsters and feel like a real monster slayer, or brilliant because you found a new way to traverse terrain. Hell, you can even force a Cyclops to become your personal bridge across ravines if you bring them down near the edge of a cliff. But sometimes you slip through the enemy, your limbs flailing and taking extra damage based on the goofed up physics of your impact. Sometimes an ogre will just grab someone, run away, and jump off the cliff with, completely unprovoked. There are also many dungeons scattered throughout the world that appear as caves on your map. These can have some of the best loot in the game hidden within. DD1 usually filled these areas with all sorts of terrible monsters, simple but effective puzzles, and oftentimes rewarded you by making that dungeon into a shortcut to use later on. However, what I've found in DD2 so far is heavily varied. Many dungeons are small, filled with weak mob enemies, and very little loot or resources. For instance, the Tomb of Kumyage, or Miage, surprised me by soft-locking my game. I had dropped into a lower level, dealt with an obstacle, and then found that I had no way of dealing with the follow-up obstacle. It simply wouldn't break, wouldn't allow me to go forward. You cannot fast travel from indoors, so I was left to close out my game and load my last end save. See, hard saves are referred to as, quote, the last time you rested at an inn. Auto saves and manual saves are what I would call soft saves. These saves won't always be safe. This leads me to reload a hard save and losing 90 minutes of hard-fought gameplay, but at least my file wasn't forked. The last short bit about being out in the wilderness is a tip. Be on the lookout for traveling merchants. They often have very rare items for sale, such as golden trove beetles and worm's life crystals. In some respects, being in the city is more rough than being lost in the wilderness surrounded by beasts and ghouls, which is a pretty fat harsh on the mellow when it comes to seeking peaceful refuge. There's plenty to look at, run around and scavenge, and ladders to climb. You're free to pick up any items, gold pouches, or loot from treasure chests that you see. Every single item that you see was put there for you, the player. In some aspects, this older game logic is refreshing. I don't have to worry about upsetting random NPCs or being chased by guards because I stole from them or selected the wrong dialogue option. The most controversial points about the city would have to be the cost of all goods and services. They're exorbitant, and they'll leave you broke after upgrading your gear or staying at the inn to recover health. The biggest tip that I can give players is that you will have multiple opportunities to buy different houses, so you no longer have to pay to stay in inns. There's a house in Burnworth for 20,000, or, a little less than thoroughly changing your appearance at the barber. Of course, if you have the money burning a hole in your pocket, you could just choose to throw away 2,000 gold on a cute short cutscene where you buy everyone a round of beers at the tavern. I don't believe it does anything other than that. Well, either way, when you're fed up with society, you can choose to hop on an ox cart to go see a different town. You may also get ambushed on your way there. Take caution, because the beasties out here, as well as your helpful NPCs and even you, can destroy the ox cart you were traveling on.
Behold, a land of unforgiving deserts.
And not much else, really. This area is filled with much harder enemies, so don't make the mistake I did when I first arrived and try out a brand new vocation. I also lost my pawn that was carrying my camping kit and didn't bring a backup. It was awful. It was also a pretty bad move on my part, and it sucked. When it comes down to it, traveling via Fairy Stone is the safest and best way to travel, though they also cost 10,000 gold apiece when you can find them at a shop.
Behold, an ancient sect of elves.
Right, yeah. The unsociable elves and their quote-unquote kingdom. I do like that they all speak in Elvish, and it leaves you to your own devices to either do without a translator or go hire a pawn that is a woodland wordsmith to get translated subtitles as you chat with the 4 important NPCs that are around. While I show the entirety of the Elven Kingdom, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that class. I was so excited when I found it. I had originally planned on it being my primary vocation. However, it really wasn't for me. It's just a strange blend of debuff and support that feels far too removed from this game's combat system to feel useful or fun. I actually had recorded and edited like 6 or so minutes of Trickster gameplay that I had originally planned having its own section in this video, but I removed it. It's just not interesting. I didn't have anything positive to really talk about. I fought 2 dragons, one that took me 25 minutes to slay, and I was rewarded with an incessant pinging to invade various adventures and conversations.
Behold, hearts set ablaze.
Did I mention this game has romance? The game kind of surprised me with it, to be honest. All of a sudden, an NPC was looking at me with the Dragon's Dogma 1 like anime ooh-woo rosy cheeks and wanting to go on a walk with me. It was honestly kind of jarring. Quests in this game are super hit and miss. Sometimes you're tracking down a griffin and using the severed head of a gorgon or a Medusa to turn it to stone so that a local sculptor can sketch it before he, turns a chunk of marble into its likeness. This was followed up by a wet fart of a reward. You do get to see the cool statue, but I believe I only received 5,000 EXP.
Behold, griffin.
Other quests ask you to do strange objectives that feel so out of place in the modern age of gaming, such as watching and following this man for a full 28-minute day-night cycle as he tells the same 4 stories over and over. But it's hard to stay salty when it also has great cutscenes and really interesting characters like Wilhelmina. Oh, that kiss though. Oh, she assertive, and she a homie too. Other quests have great set-piece events that happen to the world around you. But the game can't help but feel off or janky long enough for you to be awestruck or remotely immersed. There's a wide variety of quests, at least within the main storyline, such as this little stealth mission, one of several stealth missions. The game doesn't even have a stealth mechanic, by the way. While other main story quests and side quests don't necessarily tell you how to complete them, such as finding the enigmatic Nameless Village, which I found on a lark due to an escort quest that I stumbled on. But they also have oracles that you can pay a pittance to, and they'll give you a really vague hint, or you can just hire a pawn that has quest knowledge. They'll be your guide. Sometimes you fail quests too, even if you're not sure how. There's no redos either. You're meant to simply take what fate deals you and move on. Others have multiple outcomes. Here's another gripe. If I'm on a quest, don't randomly pull my attention away into a forced conversation with another NPC. This same gripe led to me having to try and follow that storyteller for another 28 minutes. The story of Dragon's Dogma is pretty shallow, but isn't without nuance. There's a prophecy. You are the chosen one. And now you do hero things on your way to taking down a big, mean, evil dragon that stole your heart. I mean, it pretty much just follows much of what the first Dragon's Dogma set out to do. But so far, it's actually lacking in comparison to its predecessor. It may turn out to be gangbusters and super hard to follow. That's why I'm happy that the fun little NPC handbook exists. It might not be as thorough as, say, Final Fantasy XVI, but they didn't have to put this in here at all. Now I know exactly what to get Sigurd, so he'll teach me the cheesiest spearhand schmoves. Alright, now for the hard part. Like I said at the top, I'd be sprinkling my criticisms throughout, but I do truly love this game. However, this is going to feel pretty harsh. You may have heard that being in Vernworth, the capital, sucks somewhere other than here. The other reasons it sucks other than randomly spawning loot. I know that monsters sometimes get into the city and tend to run amok, especially at the gates. The game isn't very well optimized. In fact, it chugs on most PCs and has bouts of lag or chug on consoles as well. This may very well get updated soon, perhaps they've even made strides in updates over the past week. This also has the band-aid fix of exiting the game fully and starting it back up, which could mean that there's a memory leak of some sort. But you know what isn't an optimization issue? Crappy physics that make you slip on oil every time you touch a surface the game doesn't want you to touch. What's worse is that this happens all over the place in the goofiest terrains. Terrain that doesn't look at all like it would cause you to slip around. Moreover, how can I tell what roofs are safe to run around on? Is this one a little too slanty? Not to be that guy, but I'm gonna be him for another second. You could run around on every single rooftop in the first Dragon's Dogma. It was also easier to handle your character, and they wouldn't be trying to jump off of stuff all the time. It was actually and honestly a cakewalk. Dare I say it was even fun. That leads me to another painful point. The Mystic Spear Hand is goated. It is the arcane warrior of Dragon Age Origins all over again. You have Dante's Stinger Attack, Nero's Devilbringer, a Globe of Invulnerability. You deal copious amounts of both physical and magical damage, and you can go anywhere you want to. All of the equipment looks great, and on top of that, the combat feels amazing and the moves are super flashy. You are Darth Maul at his height, and everything should fear you, which is why it fills me full of FOMO when I'm not using it. Despite what class you favor, DD2 is sure to surprise you now and then with some of its bugs. Like this time where the game somehow misplaced the entire Earth. Just a void of nothingness lined with stone. Thankfully, I nor every NPC in the world fell through. Did I say world? Oh yeah. This persisted even through a loading screen into a different zone. This was a major issue for about 2 hours until I reset the game. That was the bad part. Now to the rotten part. You may have clicked this video for insight on this bit, and I'd like to keep it short and bittersweet. Very few people share my sentiment online. This isn't a Dragon's Dogma 2 issue, this is a Capcom issue. The Resident Evil 4 remake had exclusive guns, attaché case upgrades. Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake, Village, they all have a purchase that unlocks everything that you would otherwise have to complete challenges for. Street Fighter 6 has a $50 all-access pass. We can't forget the $60 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collaboration back in August, which for some is way worse than the expensive costume packs that Street Fighter 5 tried to shell out years before. Monster Hunter World, however, is worse. It's littered with pendants to hang from your weapons, hairstyles, stickers, emotes, random crap for your house that no one is going to see. And on top of it, having to purchase tickets to edit your character. Sound familiar? Rise has much of the same, but to a lesser degree. This can all likely be traced back to one tie-wearing marketing industry man at Capcom HQ, or Luke from Street Fighter. I'm a huge Capcom mark, to be frank, and this has played many of the games I love for at least the last 9 years. Okay, thank you for hanging out and bearing with me as I got all of that out of my head. Dragon's Dogma is a game that asks everything of the player and allows no exceptions. This game tells you that you must play it on its terms, and it gives no quarter. Sometimes you just get murdered by a wraith in the night. Other times you just get unlucky with monster spawns and you end up fighting a cyclops, a pack of wolves, a gang of harpies, and a tribe of goblins all at the same time. Sometimes the bridge you wanted or needed to use gets destroyed in combat and you'll have to rest for several days until someone can get around to fixing it, or there might be other routes around if you've a discerning eye. It is unapologetically itself. I usually hate when someone uses the "it's like Dark Souls" comparison because it's typically done so in a brain dead manner that doesn't explain anything about the points they're trying to drive. So naturally, I'm going to attempt to do that here. When you sit down to play Dark Souls, you know what you're in. You will die, you will likely die a lot, but you will make progress no matter how incremental. You'll be challenged, you will likely get frustrated at times, but no one says, "Oh, game bad." Just, yeah, that's Dark Souls, man. It's a given, and it's a given that it plays and feels that very specific Dark Souls way. Enter Dragonstock. You will be wanting, you will be scraping by at times, cherishing hard-earned victories and begging for a rest point. You will claw your way up from the dirt until you have mastered the arts of assassination, dragon slaying, and all the neat stuff that you can do with a bow. The other negative, however, and it's probably my biggest gripe, is that the world feels massive but not populated or tempting to travel thoroughly through, given the lack of fairy stones, port crystals. Most of the time, I am still trekking on foot and ox cart when I can, despite having well over 400,000 gold and being almost level 50. That's it. That's everything. As you can tell, even I am divided on this game. I'm having a ton of fun. I'm in fact loving it every time I sit down to play, whether it's using the assassination skill from DD1, the cheap as hell nothing personnel could Formless Feint, or the incredibly busted and all-around god tier class that is the insect glaive wielding mystic spear hand. But the feeling of old game design still lingers on everything, from the menus to the narrative, the clunky platforming, the collision, NPC, and pawn AI. It's a wonderful game if you have the patience or the heart, but it is certainly not for everyone, especially at a new quote-unquote quadruple A price, or $70 USD for the base game. I won't be stopping anytime soon, and I hope that you take the time to check it out when it suits you, if you are even a little bit interested, but perhaps wait until some of the kinks get worked out. Just don't expect a whole lot to change outside of balance, item, and of course quest availability, and some DLC. Before I go, I'd like to quote Pat from Castle Super Beast and Pat Stares At on Twitch, because he summed up my feelings in one very deep, critical hit. Quote, "It's the best 10 out of 10, 7 out of 10 game I've ever played." Thanks again for watching, listening, and I'd really appreciate hearing from you down below. So go ahead, tell me I'm terrible at complaining, or sharing my misery and my love for this game. Either of those, or really anything else that I didn't say. Until next time, I appreciate you. Stay safe.
So tasty!